Pardon me. All right, so I'm going to be quiet because you'll hear enough from me over the next 4, 5, 10, 20, 30 years plus about the work we need to do. I'm asking something very important. You're here because you care. Let's go beyond today and let's be aggressive around holding people, the right people accountable, or making sure that we stop talking about the proficiency rates in math and literacy, but give me some strategies. Right? What are the policies that are getting in the way of helping us as teachers? How are we in our teacher ed in our university preparing teachers? I teach at Michigan State, and trust me, don't be surprised when they enter our schools not really knowing what's going on. Because the same issues that are in our K-12 exists also in our higher ed. And I say that loud and proud every single day in faculty meetings at Michigan State University on farmland. So it is important for us to begin and examine the strategies that's going to move us forward. And that's what this is about. So with that, I'm going to introduce our keynote for today. I'm calling her Dr. Yo-Yo. And you know, I was going to read this long bio, but y'all know I'm in my hoodie, I'm in my hat, I'm walking like this, I'm teaching English and stuff like this. This is who I am. And so I'm going to let Dr. Yo-Yo, you're going to learn all about her. She's brilliant. A brilliant black woman, but I can actually list all of her things on her resume, and she still got to fight. Yeah, we know about this now. So I want to bring her up. She is like, so when I was a principal, and that was like 15 years ago, she came.
I was only 15.
She was only 15, and I was only 5. And she came up, and I met her because we were doing some work at NYU, trying to transform the way we were doing in school. And she came up, and she walked in the room, I was like, wow, the energy. And we've stayed in contact since then. I followed her all on social media. She'll give you all that information to follow her. She's brilliant. She is not just a professor at a high-level work institution doing great work at the institution, but she's out in these streets doing work too. And we can't say that for everybody. So I'm gonna stop. Dr. Yo-Yo, it's all yours.
Good morning, beautiful people.
Good morning.
It's so good to see you. Y'all feeling all right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so be patient with us because we have to figure out the sound. But what I want to say is, first of all, I want to thank my brother Curtis so much for your vision. And we know that the people who lack vision are the people who perish. And we have always had vision. It's just that folks get in our way. Sometimes we get distracted. We don't keep on our purpose, whether you kept on your purpose. Principle, doing the work, going for your doctorate, and remembering your people. And so thank you for remembering me and bringing me into this space. Brother Chris, thank you so much for everything. And Michael, let's give a shout out for BMEA.
Woo!
Yes. Talk about a warrior for our folks. Sister Eurisha, say hello, and I know Sister Jennifer Banks is coming too. But I'm gonna get started. Can y'all see this? I wish we could pull the shades down. There no shades? Okay, thank you. See, the community always rises up because I want y'all to see these images because anytime I go out and I do professional development presentations, it's important that I bring my ancestors into the room, so I won't be doing that. So there's some ancestors on here, there's images of beautiful black children, and I want to offer a frame to what Brother Curtis is saying about literacy. Yes, I'm an English teacher. I've been teaching for, this is my 30th year. For those of y'all who say, well, she look 30. So what I want to do is to offer a frame, right, for the mindset of English teaching, math teaching, And I know you're going to have some workshops that get down to the nitty-gritty, but that's not what this is this morning. I'm trying to kick off to remind us of who we are and whose we are, and the questions we need to ask, and the mindsets, and some of the decarbonizing of our own minds that we need to do. So I'm framing this as the pedagogy we need, racially and culturally responsive literacy and the centering of Black academics. The first question is, I do want you to chat to the person next to you. And I know Brother Curtis said that this is a conversation we'll be having for the next 4 years. But in the context of the election or not, how is your heart this morning? How is your heart? Talk for about, I'll come back for you in about 2 minutes. You are just one other person, because at the table we do it all day.
How is your heart?
Doing better today.
Okay.
What about you? How's your heart?
My heart is broken because of the election, but also I realize that we got to move ourselves. We can't rely on Kamala or Donald, whatever economic status you're in, rich, poor, black, white, young, old, you got to move yourself. We can't rely on our bosses. We are in the classroom. I'm in the driver's ed car. I've invested in myself to come to Marygrove College, which is now a high school. I'm investing in myself, and you're an educator, I'm an educator. We are investing in ourselves for our next journey. And this could be a director. This could be seeking funding for my LLC, which I have for 2 years, DWM driving school. And what I want to do is get a building, community center, driver's ed, resume writing, adult reading, and there are funds available, but I need to talk to someone for that next piece. So, you may know someone, hey, you need to go to this website, put in the description. Kizzy Parks, if I'm saying her name right, she's on YouTube. She knows how to write government contracts. And the government is giving millions away for people to think of a new idea, to employ others. So maybe I need to contact her. So, yes, very powerful.
And if you get a chance to talk to someone, carry that conversation over, and be sure to check in on people and ask them how their heart is doing in another way, right? Thank you for that. I want you to think about what you're willing to release today, because the thing is, we hold a lot of things in our hearts and in our bodies, and we can't do it all the time. Sometimes we have to let things go for a short period of time. So this is a silent moment. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to think to yourself, what are you willing to release today? What are you willing to let go of, at least for the time we're together at this beautiful conference? Give you about 30 seconds, silently think within yourself, what are you willing to let go of? Let's shout a few things out. What are we letting go in the room, y'all? Fear. Thank you. He said anger. I didn't come to cry, but I just went. Anger, fear. What are we letting go? Sadness. Sadness. What are we letting go? Thank you. Always thinking. Old ways of thinking. Yes. Let it go.
Yesterday, because they were better tomorrow is tomorrow.
Listen, drop the mic on that. I'm gonna thank you. Thank you, thank you. Let it go, we can't hold it all the time. So I'm going to talk about pedagogy. Remember I said like the pedagogy that, so what is pedagogy? It's how we do as a teacher. So actual example from the dictionary says is the method and practice of teaching, especially as an academic subject or theoretical concept. So when we talk about culturally relevant pedagogy, racially literate pedagogy, we know that we have to have a certain level of consciousness to do what we're doing, math, science, social studies, in the classroom. So we know what the rates are. But what I want to do is have us have a larger contextualization for these rates, because 20% proficiency or 80% non-proficiency, whatever the numbers are, that doesn't happen in a vacuum. And when you understand your history and you understand the excellence and you understand, particularly for Black people, what reading and math and literacy has always been, you know that there's something that's not right and it's not us. So what we need to be thinking about is what needs remediation? Is it our children or is it the curriculum and the pedagogy that they are constantly in front of? And the remedial is problematic, and that kind of language. So, this is the pedagogy of now. These are just images globally of what's impacting the world. Whether it's hurricanes, or constantly saying that our lives matter, we're still dealing with the fallout of COVID-19 in terms of mental wellness. For not just our students, but for our teachers as well. I need to be honest about that. That's why I do a lot of my work around healing and healing-centered education and not trauma education. We know the trauma, we need to heal. So if this is the pedagogy of now, going all the way from our indigenous brothers and sisters from 1492 up until 2024, and having to say Asian lives matter, and Black lives matter, and gay is bad, all of these things, both bans. There's a trend of them arresting our children as early as 5 years old, and having suspensions in preschool. So you see our babies here that are talking about releasing anger and sadness, the brilliance of their emotional intelligence, and they're being put in handcuffs at preschool. So we have to, what I want to remind us of is that we have to be really aware. We know kind of the story out there, but we need to know the specifics, because in order to know what you're fighting against, or what you're fighting for, you have to know what you're fighting against. And so this is ridiculous. And part of it is, and not always, but part of it is the gap of the teachers. Now, again, speaking of Black and Latino teachers, indigenous teachers whose minds are colonizing, still carry out a pedagogy of racism. But fundamentally, what I know and I believe that when you have a Black teacher, a Latino teacher that understands the struggle, their pedagogy is different. And it's difficult when you're not of that particular culture or background to have the same type of empathy or sympathy or understanding. And so a gap that we have been seeing, and this is why we need more and more teachers of color. That's why I work with New York City and teach all these other programs of getting both men, because we need our men in the classroom, as well as diverse men in the classroom, in addition to teachers. So this is the gap of teaching. And that plays out in different ways. So when Yale did a study in 2019 and asked teachers, mostly white teachers, who do you think is going to start trouble in a preschool classroom? I want you to see the connections. 42% of those teachers said the Black boys. Now there's something going on with boys in general, because 34% believe that the white boys will start trouble as well. So there's just something about gender also in education, that we expect girls to be still and obedient, and when they don't, they're seen as troublemakers. Or when our girls get to elementary school and they start feeling who they are and knowing who they are expressing who they are, they're called loud, right? So school is really about domesticating kids, right? And when they're young like this, they're just trying to figure out their bodies. And you're suspending them and putting them in handcuffs, but your beliefs are starting with who you're watching. And if you are looking for a child to misbehave, you will find some. So what's important for us, and I want to really briefly bring in, I had a video here, I'll see if I can play it. So Project 20, I'm not expecting everyone to read it, but we have to understand what is coming next. And not from a space of fear, but a space of being, like fortitude, of knowing what we're fighting for and against. So what does Project 2025 mean specifically for Black families? Eliminating Head Start programs and Title I funding, right? So first of all, it started uneven, and now it's trying to make it even more uneven. It means removing federal protections for LGBTQ plus students and families. And yes, in our community, there are LGBTQ plus families, people that are in our own families, right? Reducing funding for students with disabilities. Now this is interesting because of the way the game is often played, that our children are disproportionately put in special education. I'm all about, listen, the IEP should be for everyone. An individual education plan is what it should be for everyone, right? And especially for our children who may have different abilities. But we also have to look at how our boys and girls, even more now, are disproportionately put in special ed because we know that special education is 3 times the funding per student than general ed. So it's a cash grab in some ways when it's done disproportionately. But if they are cutting it, it's interesting to see what that means for schools that get funding where our children go in special ed as well as general ed. I know that was a lot, but this is what we have to be aware of. Cutting children's health insurance. Abolishing the Department of Education. What are we going to do? Who's going to teach the babies? Rescinding free school lunch. So not only do they want us to be uneducated and unhealthy, this project wants us to starve too. School vouchers. I'm not even going to start with school vouchers. All we have to do is look at the history. School vouchers, that is a fraud. You can give me a ticket, but if the ticket is going into a burning house, I don't want it. So it's important that we understand. But I'm going to play a test video.
Before being elected for a second term, Donald Trump said that he would be a dictator on day one. And when given the chance to calm voters' fears on that subject, he doubled down.
He says, you're not going to be a dictator, right? I said, no, other than day one. We're closing the border, and we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator.
The president has pledged to take care of unfinished business from his first term, completing the wall along the US-Mexico border, reinstating travel bans on some Muslim-majority countries, and he's threatened to cut funding to Ukraine and to withdraw the US from NATO. But he's also made a series of new promises, such as ending birthright citizenship in the United States, cancelling the visas of foreign students who participated in what he's called anti-Israel protests, and withholding funding from schools with vaccine mandates. He's also pledged to revive a program used by President Eisenhower in the 1950s, known by the ethnic slur Operation Wetback, when 1 million Mexican immigrants were rounded up and deported. Using it as a model, Trump has promised to carry out the largest mass deportation of immigrants in U.S. history.
They're ruining our country. And it's true. They're destroying the blood of our country. That's what they're doing.
Some of his second-term plans are detailed in a document called Project 2025, a 900-page manifesto written by the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation. Among other things, it calls for firing tens of thousands of civil servants, expanding the power of the president, enabling Trump to use the Justice Department to target his enemies. It also calls for dismantling the Department of Education, criminalising pornography, and banning the sale of the abortion pill, which is used in more than half of abortions nationwide. Proposals Democrats call extreme and dangerous. Before being elected for a second term, Donald Trump said that
So I'm gonna stop there, because I really wanted to get to that piece about abolishing, right, the Department of Education. This doesn't mean that we have more fear, this just means we understand what the fight is. And for us, the fight is not new. We're not new to this, right? It may manifest in a different way, but what we might find ourselves doing is fighting on behalf of others and advocating for others, understanding our history of fight in this country. So to begin to continue to fight for ourselves and for others. So in some ways, we may feel like we are going backwards, but trust me, as long as we double down on the fight, we will move forward. And that's what we have to be committed to. So the pedagogy that has always been, is this is 406 years of dehumanization. When the first 21 Africans were brought from Ghana to Jamestown, Virginia. That started the dehumanization policies in everything from healthcare to education. And so 406 years is not easy to overcome, and this is what I want you to see about the beauty and the brilliance of who we are. Just started really fighting this in a movement way in the 1940s. And here we are, where we are. But this is not new to us, nor was it new to Frederick Douglass. So when people ask, why did you celebrate Juneteenth and not the 4th of July, just have them read Frederick Douglass's speech. I just want to share that. Just have them read it, and that's the answer. Again, not new to us. Our young people always have stood up. From SNCC to the Youth NAACP. This is a little bit out of order. I'll go back to that. Martin Luther King was once a little boy too. And in fact, he gave one of his most powerful speeches when he was 16 years old as a freshman at Morehouse. And he said, education without morals is like a ship without a compass, merely wandering nowhere. It is not enough to have the power of concentration, but we must have worthy objectives upon which to concentrate. It is not enough to know truth, but we must love truth and sacrifice for it, right? And our young people have always known what they deserve, even when the society hasn't listened, but they continue to fight. From Ruby Bridges at 6 years old, integrating New Orleans schools, to 13 and 14-year-olds in Boston and New York City. In my hometown of New York, right, we had high school students in 1968. This was before culturally responsive education, culturally sustaining education. This was young people saying, we are sure that you, the Black community, will recognize the long overdue changes that our demands call for. We grew tired of waiting for you adults, these are the young people talking, to really wake up and understand what we've been trying to tell you all these years. These so-called schools you were rushing us off to every morning represented to us cruel prisons when we were sentenced to serve our time without hope of parole. They had hope, and they also had a plan, because in 1969, they came up with a list of demands. And if you look at this, what's number 10? They call for culturally relevant pedagogy before it was even a name. Those are our young people. And it goes through college. I'm not going to show you this. A lot of these things I'm offering as resources for you to just take a look at the power and the persistence and the commitment. And we have to continue to fight. So these are young people at CUNY. This is a film that just came out called The 5 Demands. I'm not going to forget this. I'm going to go to the next slide. I'm trying, yeah. All the way to Emory University in 2015. And in 2016, you know about Spike Lee's Two Fist Up, his documentary where he looked at the young people at Mizzou, the football team, remember? The football team that said, unless you give us more Black teachers and you change the pedagogy and the curriculum, we will not play. And them not playing a few games cost the college over $1 million. And the president had to step down. And one of the young men, Jonathan Butler, JB, went on a hunger strike. He said, I am willing to die. I am willing to die and put my body on the line. The president stepped down. Martin Luther King said that the function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character. That is the true goal of education. When Curtis said earlier, what you're demanding of teachers, what you're asking for them. And we know that teachers are feeling it too. And I am pro-teacher, I've been a teacher for 30 years. But we also know that teachers do not direct the children. And we have to be able to hold them up to what the possibility of education is. And we have a blackprint. We have ancestors and contemporary folks that have talked about our genius and talked about who we are. From Marion Wright Elliman, who started the Freedom Schools, to Baba Asa Hilliard, to W.E.B. Du Bois, to our current OG of education, Gloria Ladson-Billings, Dr. Adelaide Sanford, who was the first Black regent in New York State and sent out a letter of encouragement at 93 last week telling us to keep fighting. Mary McLeod Bethune, Bethune-Cookman College still stands. And we have to reframe how we see ourselves. Baba Asa said he never met any child of any group who are not geniuses. He said there's no mystery on how to teach them. The first thing you do is treat them as human beings, and the second thing you do is love them. So we have to see our children in their full humanity, but we first have to see ourselves in our full humanity. Some of us are not there yet. The pedagogy that needs to be, for now, is a pedagogy of love. Love is at the root of all revolutions. Any revolution that you've seen over time is rooted in love. Bell Hooks, the goddess that she is, she said, if we give our children sound self-love, they will be able to deal with whatever life puts before them. But I want to say we have to first give ourselves sound self-love so that we can pass it to our babies. Our babies are ready. We often get in the way. And we have to reframe genius. Now, I put up Albert Einstein because the more that I read about him, the more that I respect him. Albert Einstein was often in rooms with white men who said degrading things about Black people. But because he spent time in our communities, he knew that we were genius. And in fact, the last days of his life, he was invited to speak in several places, and he said, no, 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 except the Lincoln University in HBCUs. So he spent his last year of his life very ill, but traveling around and fellowshipping with scholars and students at HBCUs. So when we think of the term genius, we often think of Albert Einstein, and indeed he was a genius. But we are also geniuses. And our legacy matters. This sister right here, Lisa Yale Porter, she created web animation. George Washington Carver, 427 ways to use the peanut. Our story with our children and our families, and I'm saying there to the teachers in the room, there and our, it has to begin and end with genius. That's Dr. Goldie Muhammad. And I want you to know, and maybe y'all do already, that it is almost impossible to think of living life without the inventions of Black people. If you have a cell phone, hold it up. Okay? Every day, like you're, it's like, morning, I can't even like put it down on the table, it's not in my pocket. Maybe T. Sampson, the Black man. Computer, not Bill Gates. What's the other guy with the apple? Not Steve Jobs, Philip Nguyen. It's the father of the internet and the computer. Every time you step on an elevator, every time you stop at a traffic light, every time you bend to tie your shoe, women, every time you put on a sanitary napkin, men and women, every time you go to the ironing board and you use the iron, you turn on the light. You go to a roller coaster, you eat ice cream and potato chips. Black person. This is not taught, but it doesn't mean that we should know it. And when you know it, you demand things differently from the teachers who don't know it. Just a few examples. From the space shuttle retrieval, to the photo embossing machine, to the guitar, to the motor for a car, to the rotary engine, the printing press, the envelope seal. You know how expensive envelope seals are? Most of us don't even have envelope seals. We can sign the back of an envelope. We put a sticker. We created the seal that people use when they get their initials done. The galvanic battery. I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what that is. So when we're talking about math, and we're talking about literacy, what's most important before we teach the content is to have the students understand who are the scholars and the inventors and the geniuses in that field so they can see themselves as a possibility. We don't often think about genius. The internet can be a blessing and a curse. In this case, you can just put in Black prodigies and get hundreds of stories. But what I want to tell you, that the Black geniuses, the prodigies, the everyday student, and not just the incredible 9-year-olds or the 12-year-olds who went to Oxford University, or the 4-year-old who speaks 14 languages. Our children have different types of talents. They don't have to have that type of talent to be considered a genius. So what we need to do as parents and as teachers to make connections to your work and your life to the excellence of Black children. And what I'm saying by that is that everything you do and everything you think should be connected to flourishing their genius. And if it isn't, you're not on the path. So this is my contribution. I don't have time to get into it. This is the racial literacy model. But what I want to focus on and what I'm focusing on is what I'm calling the archaeology of self. It's an excavation of what we truly believe about Black children and their ability. Examining our biases, examining those internalized thoughts that have been passed to us through our own education, right? And to resist. And so this is the work I do with my students, I do with teachers, I do with superintendents, to really examine why is it important to think about and examine our beliefs and our actions when it comes to race. So here's a question I have for you. Curtis, let me know what time I have when it's over, because I can talk for 7 hours. Here's a 10 more minutes. 20. Oh, somebody said 5 more days. Somebody said 5 more days. Okay, 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes. But here's a question I want you to ask yourselves, and this is a private, internalized question. And I really want you to take a moment to either write in your phones or write in a book, or close your eyes. What do you need to unlearn about Black children to see their inherent excellence? What is getting in the way for you? Let me give you about a minute to reflect on that. Thank you for doing that. So as I wind down, I want to bring in psychologist Jean Piaget, who said, and I don't often cite them, I try to cite as much as I can Indigenous and Black and Latino psychologists, particularly those who are focused on our learning and our development. But Jean Piaget said something very powerful. He said, what we see changes what we know, and what we know changes what we see. Yes. And where we won't start, or where I want to tell you, when you start hearing this language, stop people immediately. Where we won't start in talking about our children is that they're at risk, that they're defiant and confrontational, that they're thug, even though Tupac had a different definition of the thug life, right? We all should know what that is, because that was extremely powerful. He put that on his body. He was going through his own thing, right, as he was, and you could see his change in the same way you saw Malcolm change over time when he fully understood how the system was trying to use him. But that of life is a lesson for all of us. What we won't do is call our students minorities or non-white or subgroup. Reject this language. We will not refer to them by tier. They're tier 1, they're tier 2, they're tier 3. No, they're human. And they're readers. And they're emerging readers. And they're genius. We will not talk about them as disadvantaged. I don't care how poor some of us may be. We are not disadvantaged because we're rich in our culture and in our understanding of who we are and our legacy. We will not call them non-readers, and we will not call them struggling readers, because maybe the teachers are struggling to teach. So let's support the teachers to be better so they can meet the potential of the students in front of them. And this so-called achievement data, y'all, listen, we know what we can do with numbers. Look at the polls, look at the votes. We know we can manipulate numbers. Okay, so don't let someone tell you, well, this is where your child is, this is the achievement data. We can make numbers say whatever we want them to say, when we want them to say. And we will not call them unmotivated. Because which children you know are up on a Saturday morning, coming and listening to lectures? That's not unmotivation. Yeah, they might have to be with their mommy and daddy, that's besides the point. But our children are not unmotivated, they just have to have their energy directed in the right direction. Yes. And all of this requires that you look at yourself, that I do a constant look at myself. And this is why the archaeology of self is so important. So asking ourselves, who am I? Who do I wish to be? Particularly in the life of a child. What are my desires? Can I say Black Lives Matter out loud? And if you can, why not? Am I an anti-racist educator? You can be an educator of color, doesn't mean that you're anti-racist. From the amen corner.
Amen.
And when people see you, do they recognize the kind of justice in you? What do your colleagues say about you? You just going along with the status quo? Or are you fighting and advocating for children and families? What thoughts do you need to interrupt? And who are the people you keep around? I'm gonna leave that at that. Uncle Jimmy, also known as James Baldwin, y'all. I'm related to a lot of famous people. We all are, they just didn't know it. Uncle Jimmy said, I knew I was Black, of course, but I also knew I was smart. I didn't know how I would use my mind, or even if I could, but that was the only thing I had to use. We have to preserve our own minds and the minds of our children. That is our weapon. That is our magic. That is our miracle. That is our way forward. And this is Goldie's model. I'm going to flip through this. And of course, I just want to mention Cultivating Genius by Dr. Goldie Muhammad, that book. Know what the research is saying. And when you buy a book for your child, make sure they're represented in it. This is a study, 2018 repeated in 2019, 50% of all characters in children's books are white males. Not even the white girls are getting a share. 27% are animals. When you combine First Nation people, Latinx, AAPI, and African American, you put all those numbers together, it's still not more than animals represented in children's books. Now, I like a cute little bunny, but I want to look at a child that looks like me. So one thing you can demand is that in school, when we talk about culturally literate, racially literate, culturally responsive, at minimum, you can make sure that the books that are in the libraries and in the classrooms represent the children in that classroom. And this is the last few slides. I just want to give you an example of ELA lesson and a math lesson using Dr. Goldie's model that focuses on culturally and historically responsive literacy. What you may not know is that she has 5 pursuits. She don't call them standards, but standards are basic. She goes by African American literary societies back in the 1800s, when many of us, there were laws for us not to read. We had answers that said, no, I don't think you can read, but we're going to start reading societies. Y'all, we got to know this history. And what she focuses on, they called what they were doing pursuits, because there's no ceiling for a pursuit, but there's a ceiling for a standard. Oh, can you get to 4? Can you get to 3? So when you look at something like Nicole Hannah-Jones's Born on the Water, she asked about identity. What do you learn about African people? Skills. What do the vocabulary words mean? Enslaved, freedom, plateau, joy, determination. This is an ELA lesson right here, where we can help them learn and identify words that helps with their fluency. Intellectualism. What year were Africans captured and forced to the United States? 1619. What examples of harm happened? There were many. Criticality. What is oppression? How was it observed in the story? How was the oppression then compared to the oppression now? How did African people express happiness, self-joy, and love? We are more than what happened to us. We are a miracle that we're still here and so beautiful. All right, and here we are. If we think about, let's say, math. It's not your everyday math session, no, but math is embedded. She's identity. Students who identify themselves as a creator of video games. What kids don't like video games? Y'all know, y'all in here. Some of y'all on your phone right now playing video games. I'm joking though. Right. Video games, to learn about diversity and background in the gaming industry. Here's the skill. Students will compare the revenue of the gaming industry by finding the percent of a number. That means math standards. In terms of intellectualism, students will learn more about the gaming industry as it relates to growth and revenue throughout the year of the knowledge of industry. Criticality, students will learn how different ethnicities are represented in the gaming industry and in the games. And joy, students will create, brainstorm a game that they would like to make and present to the class. Creativity is the bedrock of what teaching should be. That's why I chose teaching 30 years ago, so that I could be creative. And when we talk about culturally responsive education, it calls for us teachers to have emancipation in mindset and empowerment and transformation. It also calls for knowledge of what culture and identity is of the children in front of you. It calls for knowledge of what is ethnic and linguistic diversity. And we have more and more children speaking multiple languages, self-knowledge, and our own ideologies. Hip-hop call for that. That's one of the principles of hip-hop, self-knowledge. Knowledge of our students and ourselves. Knowledge of the times that we're in now, the pedagogy now, and knowledge of history, and knowledge of instructional methods that are culturally responsive. So yes, parents, I know we have a lot on us, and yes, teachers, I know you have a lot on you too, but this is the direction that we have to go if we're going to fight in a way that's going to show a difference academically. Cornell West said that education is soul crafting. Do you know the weight of that? Of being able to help craft another person's soul. Mandela told us that education is not he said it is the most powerful weapon in which you can use to change the world. Do some of us believe we can do that? And if you believe it, then your actions have to be in accordance. I just want to share these last slides with you, just what everyday people are out here doing. Black Wall Street, there's a game, this husband and wife couple, look them up. Play that with your children instead of Monopoly. Black folks are rich. This is my girl, Billy. She created a culture deck where you just, like playing cards, sit with your kids and pick a deck and learn about history. Generation Wealth. This is my girlfriend, Janelle. She created a whole book for ages 13 to 19. I'm learning from it, y'all, and I ain't been 19 in a long time. About financial literacy. How do we teach it to our kids? Everyday people like us. And then, of course, we know that the election was not what we desired it to be, but it didn't mean that we didn't mobilize. It didn't mean that we didn't try to come together. Marcus Garvey said that we are going to emancipate ourselves from into slavery because while others might free the body, none but ourselves can free the mind. Mind is your only ruler, your sovereign. The man woman, person who is not able to develop and use his mind is bound to be the slave of the other man who uses his mind. And then I had a little Bob Marley playing. I can skip over that. Angela Davis, Dr. Angela Davis said we have to talk about liberating minds as well as liberating societies. I want to ask you all, are you free? Is your mind free? Is your mind liberated? And if it isn't, learn more about the beauty of who you are, because Auntie Maya said, you know better you do. And I'm going to end with Titi Tony. Auntie Maya, Toni Morrison is my auntie, James Baldwin is my uncle, W.E.B.'s Boys is my cousin. But Toni Morrison reminded us, Auntie Toni said, you are your best. We are our best. We are who we've been waiting for. I'm going to end with this video just as a reminder. That's all it is. Chris. Thank you all. Enjoy the video.